This bicyclist, guy on a bicycle, anyone could tell at a glance that he was in big trouble. He wasn't riding his bike, he was pushing it as best he could. Actually, he was using his bicycle almost like a crutch to keep himself up. And out there in Monmouth, on the sidewalks of Monmouth Avenue, the sun was bright, and he was ready to just drop at any point, but he managed to make it to Avalon Street. And there, that would be South Avalon Street, and Astolat Street. I'm going to get South Astolat Street. And there he turned onto that, and it was shady, and that helped a lot. He could keep going a little bit further. He was a little bit like a pilgrim in a way, and I'll tell you about that, Chaucer's Pilgrims in a way, but I'll tell you about that later. Or maybe even like a knight errant on a quest, but he was in deep trouble. Whether or not he'd stay up was uncertain. He was following his GPS that he had on his bicycle. Now one arm was hanging down, I think it was his right arm, hanging down almost uselessly. And one of his legs he couldn't really use. He was dragging himself along with the other leg in the bicycle. And if you look close, you could see that bad leg was even crooked below the knee. I mean, he was dirty, his outfit was bloody, his face was scratched. He was in bad shape. Well, he made it to the next avenue, or street really, and there he had to go out onto a sunny area again. This was in front of the Good Samaritan Independent Bible Church, and there was some irony in that really, because there was no one to help him, but no one was even seeing him. He was in such trouble. Now and then there'd be a car that would go by, in air conditioned. Remember, this was the second hottest day of the year, and the hottest day had been an all-time record for Richland, North Virginia. Well, he managed, people that saw him, from their air-conditioned cars, some of them would look because it was really something to see. Now and then he'd drape himself over his bicycle to just get the strength to keep going a little bit. He had a GPS, maybe I told you, GPS on his bicycle, and it was guiding him where he could go, but he could hardly see it through the haze that was coming on him. Well, he made it across the sunny front of the Good Samaritan Independent Bible Church. He made it across that, barely, and got back into the shady part of North Astolat Street. And so he didn't go down yet. Now, at that point, there was a girl noticed him. She was on the other side of the street, and she was the only pedestrian that was out to be seen. A young girl, she was maybe 13, maybe 14, pretty thing. She had like mocha colored skin, real pretty girl. And she just happened to be out because, well, she was like that. She was young, she was healthy. There was a certain excitement about being out. Now she was homeschooled, otherwise she would have been in school. But she was out there and she saw him and she watched him. Now, if you've ever seen the footage of a guy named, his last name is Pietri. He was the winner, or not the winner, of the 1908 marathon that was run. And there was debate about should he have won or not. But if you've ever seen footage of him, you probably won't forget it, because he ran into the stadium at the end of well, he didn't run, he waddled in like a duck to the stadium where Queen Victoria was in the crowd. And he just couldn't keep going. He was, I don't know how many minutes ahead of the closest competitor. but he just couldn't keep going. He was going all crooked and wobbling, and down he went. Well, the judges ultimately helped him up. For one thing, they were a little afraid that Queen Victoria was going to see a man die right in front of her. So they helped him get up. And he managed then to somehow go on and get across the finish line. Well, anyway, if you've ever seen that footage, you have some idea of what bad shape this bicyclist was in. Or another thing that might give you an idea, if you've ever read the book, or the short story rather, by Jack London called Love of Life, this was realistic fiction, that tells about that man trying to make it. This is up in Alaska, on his just desperately trying to make it to salvation. Then you've got some idea of how dire this guy's situation was. Well, the girl, she watched, and she was torn whether she should do something, and she decided she'd watch him. There was no way she was going away, but she'd watch him from across the street, and at the point that he went down, she'd be right over there and see what she could do. So he was being watched. You know, in Jack London's story, that man was also being watched by a wolf. That's a good story. You might want to read it sometime. Anyway, the bicyclist kept struggling on, and finally his bike went down, but he had let it drop, and he somehow managed to get himself to the steps of a brick house on Astolet Street, North Astolet Street. And how in the world he managed to get up those 2 or 3 steps. If there'd been 4, he couldn't have done it, or if there hadn't been a railing. But he somehow managed to get up onto the porch. And the girl watched him, and she could see that he pushed or leaned really against the doorbell. She still watched. But I'm going to leave him right now. There's something else going on that I need to tell you about.